it appears to be a lot when they're kind of piling on because they're finding all of these little, a hacksaw, oh, a rug, oh, she's missing, oh, you know, that stuff starts adding up.
Welcome to the global phenomenon, Surviving the Survivor, where we're all just trying to survive in a rough world.
What's up, STS Nation? Welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, where we make the promise to bring you the best guests in the true crime genre, and this episode is no exception. But first, our thoughts right now are with the family of Ana Walshe. The search for the missing Cohasset, Massachusetts mother of three has entered its 8th day now. A quick recap for those who have not followed the case at all. The 39-year-old mother of three was reported missing on January 4th, last seen in the early morning hours of New Year's Day. Her husband, 46-year-old Brian Walshe, he was on house arrest for a federal fraud case involving the sale of fake Andy Warhol paintings. He was arraigned this past Monday on a charge that he misled investigators, and he was ordered held on a $500,000 cash bail. And then the twists and turns get even more disturbing from there. First, let's introduce our best guests out of the gate. You've got Robert Bobby McDonald, a very Massachusetts name. He was both a state of Connecticut and United States probation officer and spent over 20 years with the United States Secret Service, including presidential, vice presidential, and dignitary protection in those divisions in Washington, D.C. And upon retirement, as if that was not enough, he joined the NBA, the National Basketball Association, as Senior Director of Global Event Security. And then we've got Monica Jordan, the one and only. She is the president of Jordan Research and Consulting. It is one of the nation's most sought-after private investigative firms. She's handled more than 50 death penalty trials and worked with the notorious female serial killer Eileen Wuornos, of which the movie Monster was made. Quick programming note, please follow us on Facebook, Insta, Twitter. On Twitter, we are at Podcast STS. You can support us on Patreon. And as my 8-year-old daughter always says, please subscribe and hit that like button. It gets the algorithm chugging. So starting off with the most important part of this story, and that is the children of Ana Walshe. As authorities continue to search for her, we can report that her 3 kids, 2, 4, and 6 years old, such young children, they are at the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families, and they remain in DCF custody. So, of course, we are thinking of them. We're also getting words about the last text from Ana Walshe to her own mother, writing, "Please, Mama, come tomorrow." That is allegedly the last text that she sent. Now on to the latest hard news, as they say. Prosecutors tonight are saying that police have finished searching the Walshe family home in Cohasset and have left the scene. Bobby, to you. Police have finished searching the home. At this arraignment, we found out that there was a knife and blood in the basement. Can we assume that they have found other stuff at their Massachusetts residence?
Well, good evening, Joel. Again, nice to be with you. Again, by way of full disclosure, I think we need to put on the record that unless something has happened in the last half hour, this gentleman is still presumed innocent, and we are in the process of the criminal investigation, which, as you know, is a reconstruction of the past in search of the truth. So as of right now, he is presumed innocent, but obviously things are pointing his way. My guess would be that if they have indicated that they have concluded their search of the residence, they have either found the item or the items that they were potentially looking for, or are satisfied with the amount of evidence that they were able to obtain in that residence and have indicated that they have completed what they're looking for. Now, again, that doesn't keep them from going back in there if something else was to pop up, but that says to me that they have found enough evidence that they need to help them make their case at this point.
And I'm glad that Bobby did my job, which is absolutely true. Brian Walshe, 46 years old, is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Right now, there seems to be a preponderance of evidence building up against him, or at least pointing in his direction. Now, Monica, there's a investigative reporter in Boston who's doing a phenomenal job. Shout out to her. Her name is Cheryl Fiandaca. She tweeted out late tonight, and obviously this program will air the following day, that investigators searching the Peabody transfer station, it's not Peabody, but in Massachusetts, Peabody transfer station, that they found trash bags with blood, a hatchet, a hacksaw, a rug, and used cleaning supplies. I assume that your investigative antenna immediately perks up when you hear this. What say you, and what are you doing if you're investigating this case right now?
Well, from a defense standpoint, from law enforcement standpoint, they're going to test all of this evidence and see if it links back to Miss Walshe, Mr. Walshe, any genetic DNA, or any, forensic evidence that can link back to Mr. Walshe. From a defense standpoint, if he got arrested and we were trying to put a defense together, we'd be using our own experts to retest everything law enforcement did on their end.
So, Monica, for the audience, because you bring up a great point, Monica is a private investigator, basically representing defendants who would be Brian Walshe. Can you just tell the audience a little bit more clearly and better than I ever could what you do day to day?
I'm a defense investigator, so I work with legal teams that are retained by the defendants, or in capital murder cases, a lot of times those defendants can't afford a legal team, so one's represented through the public defender or court-appointed counsel. And I act as a fact finder for the defense, and I aid the legal team in navigating the evidence and basically what our strategy will be for the ultimate defense of the defendant.
Now, if you were hired in this case right now, what would you say to yourself privately, let's say in your bedroom, about all this evidence piling up? It would make your job, I assume your job to aid the defense, would be increasingly tougher by all the evidence that's being found.
I don't think what I would say to myself in my bedroom I could probably say here. I'd be like, are you kidding?
You rolled her eyes.
This is a lot. This is, it appears to be a lot when they're kind of piling on, because they're finding all of these little, a hacksaw, a rug, she's missing, that stuff starts adding up. And then once the arrest comes, then we're able to actually see what they have. You hear all of this stuff in the media and you're like, oh man, you can't overcome this mountain. But then once you actually, we can't get started until, there's sometimes you can do some pre-charge investigation, which is where you get brought in before the client is charged. And you can do a little bit, but that you have to be very careful, because you don't want to impede law enforcement's investigation. You don't want to get in their way. You certainly don't want to piss them off, because that tends to alienate any ability to work with them in the future with this specific client. And so, unfortunately, in a situation like this, the defense is having to sit back, tell the client not to speak, and just wait. And it feels like the entire dump truck is running over you when you're in this holding pattern.
And I'm glad you used that analogy, because literally, speaking about dump trucks, also today in the news, a waste to energy facility, which is a variation of a garbage dump in West Wareham, which is not far from the scene where she went missing, that was searched Tuesday as well. So, Bobby, to you, you protected the president and the vice president, and you have intimate knowledge of how all of that works. From an investigative standpoint, what do you think they are doing right now to build a case here, and how soon before possibly we could get murder charges brought against this person?
Well, I think what they're doing now, Joel, is trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. They seem to have to navigate some mileage with potential information that they've gotten on where they're searching, whether it's the decedent's home, the cars, the Home Depot that he allegedly went to, the dump. There's a lot of different places that they've got to go check and see whether he was there. You've got the ability to check cell phone coverage and all sorts of different things that we talked about the last time I was with you. A lot of different electronic tools that we have now that we didn't have in years gone by. But again, as I told you with the Idaho murders case last week, this is going to take good old-fashioned police work to get out there and beat the bushes, interview people, see where he was, see what he was doing. I heard doing some research for this that, allegedly he went to the Home Depot and spent $400 on cleaning supplies, wearing gloves and a mask. And, just not a lot of good look here. The optics of this, just again, in a lot of these cases, whether it's Scott Peterson or Drew Peterson or Chris Watts, over the years, people who have killed their wives, a lot of the optics don't look good once we get past that first little period of, oh, he was very cooperative, he's cooperating with police, etc. So a lot of that will start to go downhill now as, again, allegedly his story, the cards may seem to start to fall with all these pieces of the puzzle coming together at this point.
And Bobby just rattled off a few infamous wife killers, and we talked about domestic violence. If you missed the last episode with Wendy Murphy, she's a Boston-based attorney that specializes in that and is really a brilliant mind. It's worth a listen for sure. I just want to be careful because Bobby did say decedent. We don't know for sure yet that she is not.
Fair point. The missing person.
A missing person at this point. We hope for the best outcome, but again, we can understand why Bobby would say that because nothing is looking too optimistic at this point. As they say in those horrible infomercials, there's more. That's not all, but that's not all. Investigators on Monday also removed dumpsters from outside of the Swampscott apartment complex where Brian Walshe's mother lives. So again, Monica, to you, as Bobby just stated, they are carefully, it appears, literally going through the trash here looking for evidence, right?
That's what it appears. I mean, based on the little bit of research I did about this case, it appears as if he's already spoken to law enforcement and told them that he went to his mother's. So now they're going back and really putting everything he's told them under a microscope and trying to track what he has said. And so it just would seem natural that they would go through the trash and any other means that they can collect any type of evidence. Bobby knows that, in the old days, we didn't have all this cellular technology and devices. And, it was really just doing trash pulls and getting cigarette butts and those type things. It's my understanding that he was on some kind of GPS monitoring device for his federal probation. And I can't understand why, and maybe they have, I'm sure somebody far smarter than me has thought about this, that we would just track his GPS coordinates and track him that way. He could have cut his GPS monitor off, which, is known, which they're known, defendants are known to do, unfortunately. But in that case, there's an immediate signal back to the reporting officer. You were a probation officer, you know this. And they would have known immediately that he's done this. So there's so many things that are tracking this guy, whether it be his telephone, he's got a GPS monitor on his ankle, is my understanding. It's not going to be really hard to figure this out, his path of travel.
Bobby, I want to get your reaction to that. But as Bobby mentioned just a moment ago, I don't know a single human being that has spent $450 on cleaning supplies. And he did go in there to a Home Depot buying mops, buckets, tarps, various kinds of tape. And he was wearing, as Bobby said, a mask, a surgical mask, which we see now because of COVID, and gloves, and paid in cash. But Bobby, as Monica just said, he was being monitored for this federal fraud crime. Do you think he cut off that ankle bracelet? I hadn't even thought of that, to be honest. So I'm a lot dumber than most people. What are your thoughts about it all?
Could very well be. You know, the battery could have gone out. You know, all the moons could have aligned in his favor. You know, I have a former colleague, FBI agent who teaches at our university, and who has a saying: "All criminals are stupid." Meaning, at some point, if you don't catch him today, you're going to be able to catch him tomorrow or down the road. And if this guy thought he was so smart, and if we come to find out that he's discarding items that could potentially lead to his conviction in dumpsters near his mother's house, or went to the Home Depot near his house to buy all of these things, you know, it just amazes me that people think they're going to outsmart the criminal justice system in the long run with respect to these type of crimes. It's just, it amazes me sometimes.
So one of the things that, I mean, just grabbed my attention visually is this photo and video of him walking into his arraignment on Monday, and he's basically grinning ear to ear. Monica, I know you follow facts and evidence as a private investigator. What does this say to you about him as a person, that there's allegations that his wife went missing because of him, and this guy is basically smiling, basically an FU to the media and the cameras there?
Well, ideally, this is just my personal experience. I can't speak for the world, but when a client does that and you're in a situation like this, I think optics are everything. And when you come in a room and you're smiling at a hearing where they're discussing the disappearance of your wife, that is really bad optics, and the whole world is watching. I like to tell clients of cases that I'm working on to look at the ground, or I even try and shield them from the media, because sometimes my younger clients will kind of like smile and, you know, want to say hi to their family, and it never fails. You'll be in the worst part of a trial, and you'll be looking, and something funny will happen, and you'll have two seconds of levity in the most horrific part of the trial, and the media will capture you laughing with the client, and you look like an insensitive jerk. And so I don't know what was going on. If he's doing that intentionally, it's certainly not helping his cause. It makes him look insensitive. His wife is missing. It's the mother of his 3 children, and it's bad optics. And if I was a part of that legal team, I'd be telling him to knock it off.
Bobby, to you, police were searching the area around the home, and I want to point out that Cohasset is a very affluent, quiet neighborhood, obviously with very little crime. They concluded a 2-day search in that wooded area, and came out and said that they're not going to resume that search unless new information comes out. Is that SOP? Do they know that she's maybe not there, and that's why they're not looking? Do they know more than we know?
Again, very well could be. Again, coming out of the Idaho case where, again, I indicated to you last time we spoke my disappointment with the lack of information that was coming out, and then that we were proved wrong the next day when the arrest was made after being with you. Look, each department is going to handle each case differently. Their philosophy on how they want to put some information out for some crisis communication in the area is different, again, depending upon what evidence the case is giving them. There must be some reason, whether it's every house in the area there has cameras facing and crossing over one another to make sure that areas of vision can be seen all the time. There must be some reason why they have indicated they've ended their investigation in and around the neighborhood. However, that doesn't mean that they're not still there and doing things in a clandestine or counter surveillance type of thing to look for some other pieces of information that none of us would know about or know that they're even there.
We're also hearing from the landlord, small but interesting. They live in this very affluent neighborhood, but they don't own the home. They are renting it. So we did hear from the landlord, and the landlord, according to local news reports, says that Brian Walshe, the husband, called the landlord last week asking him if he had surveillance cameras up. And Walshe told him that his wife was missing. Monica, to me, it's strange because if you're living in a home, wouldn't you know if there's surveillance cameras? And That seems to be a very suspicious sounding question. What do you make of it?
Well, if it's a rental, he may not know. I mean, if it's somebody's surveilling something that's not being linked back to the house, he would probably never know. So that's not that alarming to me. But if he's reached out to the landlord and asked about surveillance videos prior to reporting her missing, I find that problematic. I'm not saying it's not a hurdle the defense couldn't deal with down the road, but I'm just saying it's just one of those things that, like, right now, when I told you it feels like things are building and piling on, that would be problematic to me, because it sounds like you're either trying to create an alibi or potentially mislead investigators or come up with a story. And those are all three bad things when your wife is missing.
Which is what he's been charged with so far, I believe, is
Right.
misleading police. And let's be honest, as Monica said, she's spot on. That doesn't pass the smell test.
Right.
100%. Monica, I'm curious, in your world, when you see these high profile cases, does your mind immediately go to how would I poke holes in whatever investigators are looking at? Because that's the world you come from. Is that something you do instinctively?
Yes, but I have to actually have the material. I mean, in the situation where we are right now, currently, we don't have anything. So it's a little bit of, speculation and conjecture, but yeah, I mean, I would want to see, this whole thing with him being on video at the Home Depot. Do we know it's really him at Home Depot? I mean, is it his car? There would just have to be, like we've talked about in other segments of this program, you have to triangulate the information and you have to verify everything. And it's not, sometimes defense work, people think it's about getting people off and letting the bad guy go. And it's not really about that. It's about making sure it's done right. Because if we're not doing it right and we get the wrong person and we convict the wrong person, then we have two miscarriages of justice. The victim is never, the family has never provided closure. And now we've, had some poor guy incarcerated for something he didn't do. Like I've said before, is that we can't beat the science. And that's what Bobby was saying, is that, sometimes these defendants think they're so smart and they've thought of everything. You're being videoed so many times a day and you don't even know it.
We're going to jump on a bunch of viewer questions and comments in just a little while, but let's go through some of the other, key pieces of this story. When they had this arraignment, Bobby, prosecutor with the Norfolk District Attorney's Office, said in court that investigators found a bloody knife in the basement of the home that she shared with her husband. That's, when they charged him with misleading police. As if that wasn't bad enough, he was apparently searching, according to internet records, of how to dispose of a body. I don't know how it doesn't get, more obvious, let's say, than that. Your take on these two facets of the story.
Yeah, no matter how smart any criminal or potential criminals thinks they are, is they're going to make mistakes. And those mistakes are what ultimately help us lead to a prosecution. So if he made a mistake and allegedly left something in the basement that was a weapon and or a bloodied weapon, and that now is found tied to him through forensic evidence or whatnot, that's a problem. I have to be honest with you. When I was doing some research tonight to come up with some of the names of husbands that have killed their wives, I thought to myself, oh my God, I'm typing that into Google. And I told my kids, hey, you're my alibi that I was going to be on a show tonight to talk about this. But again, that doesn't pass the smell test. I mean, it's one thing to Google hotels on Cape Cod or, something like that. But, how to dispose of a 115-pound body? Boy, talk about not passing the smell test. These are things that, again, just although singularly don't convict somebody, but you add up all these pieces of the puzzle, and this is what points investigators in the direction of this potential offender based upon all these little nuggets of information. Plus, potentially, if and when we find the wife, but all of the little pieces are leading us to the prosecution for whatever happens or whatever is found to have happened, in that recreation of the past.
And Monica, I mean, the knife in the basement and some blood is damning enough, but the fact that the internet searches show he was looking for how to dispose, I believe, of 100. I think the exact search was how to dispose of a 115-pound body of a woman. I mean, if you're representing this defendant as an investigator, what are you saying to that?
So the first thing is I want to, be like, how could you be so stupid? That would be like my first thing. But what I have seen in similar cases, and when I say similar cases, a missing wife, a murdered wife or spouse, is that the murder itself is something that can be explained. But what happens is that panic sets in. I mean, just think about it. He's on federal probation. He's got to go to probate court. He probably is like the walls are caving in on him. And just for complete speculation, they get into a domestic violence situation. She falls, she hits her head, and now he's like, oh my God, the wife is dead. So instead of just calling the police and rendering aid, panic sets in. And now he's on the stupid googly machine trying to figure out how to get rid of a body. The cover up, and I say this all the time, the cover up is like 1,000 times worse than the actual act. And I don't know if I have no idea what's happened here, but I'm just saying you don't look up how to dispose a body while you're planning the murder is how I look at that. This sounds like this may have happened after, and it was almost like panic has set in.
That's a really interesting point, again, coming from a sharp mind. So let me ask you this. Let's just go with your hypothetical.
I don't know about that. I'm just saying.
I'm underscoring hypothetical. We are not saying this is what happened, but
correct.
Hypothetically, hypothetically, they get into an argument or in the early morning hours of New Year's Eve. And this has happened many times before, unfortunately. He pushes her, she hits her head, he kills her. Now he panics and he's searching. If he had just reported this to police, like you're saying, the cover-up is a lot worse. He would have potentially faced a much lighter hand of justice had he just come right out and been forthcoming. It appears he's covering something up right now, right, Monica?
That is the appearance, just based on the little bit that we know. I mean, they're finding evidence in this compactor. They're finding evidence in this other dump site. He's not being completely truthful based on what we're seeing in the media about where he went. He never left the house. I only left the house to take my son to the ice cream. Well, where were the other two kids? A lot of the things that he's been saying do not appear to be adding up. We don't know everything. And I can't help but opine, and this is just an opinion, that sometimes things happen in the heat of the moment that are unintended, and they're terrible and they're tragic. And then when you try and fix it, cover it up, it just makes it exponentially worse.
And we've had Monica on before to discuss the Dan Markel murder case, which we've covered extensively. FSU law professor who was shot and killed in his driveway. It turns out the family hired 2 hitmen, and the ex-brother-in-law is set to go on trial. That was something that was obviously, thought out and planned out, as opposed to this possible scenario where it could have just been, something that went very much awry. And as Monica said, he could have panicked and started Googling, et cetera, et cetera. Bobby, this is obviously more speculation, but it came up in our last episode about motive. And I know there's really no way to know at this point, but it does sound like he was having some financial struggles. I mean, he was under house arrest. He was caught for fraud. He was living in an affluent area. What's your gut tell you? Does your gut tell you it was for financial reasons, maybe to get life insurance, or does it tell you it was a jealous husband, or you simply have no way to know?
I think in this one, it's really tough to say. We haven't heard, or at least I haven't heard, if there was a huge insurance policy on the wife here, and if that's the case, sure, that's a potential motive. It sounds to me like things may have been just crashing in financially. And look, the holidays are a tough time to be having financial problems, especially with young kids. Ana was supposed to go to DC on a trip, I guess, for her real estate business. That's a tough time to be traveling on the holidays. Maybe that didn't go over well. Again, I think it's the holidays can be a tough time for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. They're supposed to be a joyous and happy time, but if you've got some other problems in the back, you've got to somehow deal with them. And who knows, maybe that is a contributing factor to what happened here.
Couple of other things that came up, in the arraignment and outside of the arraignment, according to media reports, is that the husband, Brian Walshe, said he last saw Ana early on New Year's Day when she took an Uber or a Lyft to the airport to fly to Washington, D.C. For work. However, the police investigation found that there was never an Uber or a Lyft call that day. She never arrived to a flight, and her cell phone actually pinged at her home later in the day. I mean, Monica, do we get to like a point of no return with so many things adding up that it almost becomes unbelievable that there's no way that he didn't commit a crime here?
Well, I think this is the exact reason why you don't want the client to be talking to law enforcement, because now everything he has said outside the presence of counsel or anything that he's discussed with his own legal team that he said is now they're fly specking and checking it, as they should. I mean, if you're telling them, hey, listen, man, I didn't kill my wife. I just saw her leave in the Uber, and then there's no Uber. Well, now you've created two questions. Where's your wife? And why did you say you saw her leave in an Uber that doesn't exist? So then you tell the next part of the story, and now you've created three questions. And so every time they try and say something, again, the cover-up makes it much more difficult. Again, if you go back to if he did do this, and for whatever reason he did it, and that's just a big if, we don't know. Sometimes when you give all of these cover-up stories, it makes the ability to resolve this either through a plea or through a better resolution through a plea or just a sentencing or any of those other opportunities. You've really kind of poisoned the well. Yeah. And if you had just told if you would have said, we got in a fight, I punched her, she fell down, she hit her head, I panicked. Then I chopped her up and put her in the dump. Even that, it sounds horrible, but in Florida, your sentence cannot be increased based on what you do to the body after the murder. So, and although that is all very horrible, to think about a young mother or anybody being dismembered or any of those things, I just feel like he's compounding his problems. However, I think it's fair to add that in some of the media outlets that I've read and looked at, that he's been hospitalized before for some kind of mental health disorder. And witnesses have provided affidavits that the father, who was a neuropsychologist or a neurologist, had indicated that he had been diagnosed as a sociopath. Those things would start becoming very important to me for sentencing issues, competency issues, and how to create a defense strategy going forward.
Fascinating. I did not know that till just now. So that would change the playing field from like you said, from a defense strategy for sure. Monica, I asked Bobby this question, so I'm going to ask you. It sure seems like we're headed towards a murder charge here. Any thoughts on how soon that could come?
Well, I always feel like there's no statute of limitations on murder in Florida, and I always feel like it's better to go slow and get it right. I know in the Idaho case, everybody's hair seemed to be on fire, that they weren't working fast enough, and all the while they had the guy in the crosshairs. They were just collecting evidence to make it a little bit more bulletproof for prosecution, and that may be what they're doing here. They may be very slow to let information out because you see how, it runs like wildfire. And what they may be doing is just continuing to collect information. I would think as soon as they impanel a grand jury, they're probably going to get this guy indicted. And they're probably,
and they have him too. It's
right.
In contrast to Idaho, we didn't. Yeah.
Right. And he's violated federal probation. They've given him some outrageous bond that he probably can't meet. I think the violation of the federal probation alone would have him held.
Yeah, that's a huge game stopper right there. That's his clock is stopping with respect to that probation, and he obviously can be returned to prison based upon that violation with whatever is remaining over him on his sentence. So that's a huge benefit to the investigation right now, that if this is the guy, they have him.
And does he get charged? I'm sorry, does he get charged? I assume he gets charged. If he is charged with murder, it would be a state charge, Bobby, or a federal charge. Can they bring federal charges since he's already in trouble federally?
No, that would be a state charge for the murder offense. And then the violation of probation would be tacked on either concurrently or consecutively, depending upon what the judge has the ability to do in that case.
And Monica, did you want to add something?
I was just going to say how terribly tragic, as if this isn't tragic enough, that the 3 children are in the custody of the Department of Children and Family Services, and there's not one family member that can, or some next of kin that could ideally take these children in. I guess Mrs. Walshe has no family or no local family. I mean, you mentioned her mother and that she at Mama, please come tomorrow. So I'm hoping maybe they're en route to get these children.
I believe Ana is of Serbian descent. I don't know if she was born here, if her mother's here. I do not know. I should know the answers, and I will find those out. But it leads us right into our first comment / question from the best audience in true crime, STS Nation. And this is from Miss Ketchup. She writes, sad, just so sad. How could anyone leave their young kids motherless, praying for justice? Again, Bobby, we don't know that she's no longer with us, Ana Walshe. We kind of all presume that that is the case. What do you say about people? You mentioned these infamous wife killers. How is it possible that people don't think of the repercussions of the children, of all the ancillary problems that they create by just committing these heinous crimes? How's it possible they're unaware?
Well, I think as Monica indicated before, when you're talking about potentially how this happens, the train leaves the station and people aren't thinking clearly. They're not putting one foot in front of the other. They're in a scramble, the chicken with the head cut off, whatever euphemism you want to use. And they're not thinking. That's the problem. I've got 3 kids. I would hope that, God forbid, I ever went into that state, that I would remember that whatever I do, whatever action that I have or do, is going to affect not only the person that I may do that against, but those around. And they're going to be the victims that are going to carry this. Again, who knows where the missus is here, and hope we find her. But, if she's gone and he's going to potentially go to prison if found guilty of this, the kids are left holding the bag, if you will. And they're the unintended victims here. And maybe that's not a bad way. That's not a great way to put it, but they are the ones that are going to carry the burden of this for the rest of their lives. And, again, may never know the answer as to what happened, and how sad.
2, 4, and 6 years old. I can't even imagine that. We'll try to get through as many of these comments as we can. The next one is from not emoji, but from Smoji. There are a million things that could have triggered him, meaning Brian Walshe. And this is in light of our conversation yesterday, where the male guest on the program suggested maybe she was having an affair. So that's in response to this comment. There are a million things that could have triggered him, and the guest chooses to say maybe she had an affair. Thank you to Wendy, the female guest, for responding in depth about entitlement and hate. Any loss of feeling of control by the abuser is a dangerous situation. It could be that she wants to leave the relationship, wants to get a job, has new friends, so many things. Monica, to you, what do you think about it overall? A motive being more of control, wanting to control the situation. Brian Walshe may have lost control, and that's why he spun out of control.
Well, I have a couple of just opinions on that. One being he lavished her with gifts, a Maserati. They have this very affluent lifestyle. She is now aware of the fake Andy Warhol paintings because the broker ends up contacting her because he can't get any information out of Mr. Walshe. So she's like, what the hell's going on? What do you mean you're selling? I don't even know if she knows that he broke into the dad's house and took them after the passing of the dad. So the little things are starting to become aware. She's becoming aware of it. Just because she's an immigrant and she may not be super savvy to all of our cultures and all the ways of America doesn't mean she's an idiot. I mean, any woman can figure out if their husband is, if I'm being lied to, my husband's committing fraud. So his world is crumbling. And now, she's maybe putting some pressure on him too. Like, what do you mean we're going to have to move? What do you mean because she's probably very confused. She thought they have this great life. And now she's realizing that it's not so great. The finances are crumbling.
She's slowly. And
so it's really like a house of cards. Right. It's like a house of cards.
Yeah. By the way, my mother is a Serbian immigrant, and I wouldn't want to mess with her. She's tough. This next comment comes from LKK, and it's right. Monica's leading us right into the comments tonight. LKK writes, and Bobby, I'll toss this one to you. He, meaning Brian, couldn't even fake his art to appear convincing. He used brand new staples on the fake Warhol, the staple gun, onto a fresh new wood frame. He went to Kinko's and had them enlarge a poster and puts in parentheses, I guess this last part, so we don't know that's true. But what's it say, I don't know, about his, I don't want to say his intelligence, maybe it is his intelligence, but maybe his state of mind. And going back to what Monica was saying, which I had not known, that maybe he was diagnosed as a sociopath, that he's just like using brand new staples and trying to, defraud people with artwork. What's that say to you?
Yeah, he's not paying attention. He's not paying attention to detail. If you're going to engage in this type of activity, at least make a good effort at it and make the effort that, you're going to be able to deceive somebody. I don't condone that. That's not what I'm trying to say here. But again, if you're putting new staples in a painting that's supposed to be 45 or 50 years old or whatever it was thought to be, again, it's not adding up. And whether you're trying to defraud someone, you're trying to commit a criminal offense and trying to beat the police. Now you're going to try to beat the criminal justice system. You tried to beat the probation system. Again, he's got a lot of problems here, and that train continues down the track. And I don't know how he's going to stop it at this point. Again, could be dead wrong, but just a lot of things are just pointing in his direction.
This next commenter, it's like a Wheel of Fortune puzzle with a zillion vowels, so I'll just call them NABE. Very sad, Monica, how we have to deal with these unexpected crimes. If anyone doesn't love or like their own spouse, then all you have to do is this: divorce and move on. I brought that up for a reason. Divorce is 100% legal. It is not a crime. Why do men, a lot more so than women, find themselves in this situation where they're committing domestic violence, even killing their spouses, instead of just leaving the situation? Easier said than done, I guess.
I mean, I think it would probably be easier to divorce them than kill them. In these situations, though, in most of the situations where I have a spouse that's been convicted, a defendant that's been convicted of killing a spouse. It's much like the Idaho case and this case, and probably what Bobby has seen when he's done any research on any of the Peterson wife killers. And this, they think they're the smartest guy in the room.
Right.
I mean, this is a fine example with the narcissism of this guy thinking he's going to pull one off on an art collector and half-ass it with some new staples from the Hobby Lobby or the Michael's Craft Store. I mean, it's no different than the Idaho guy leaving the friggin' knife sheath in the bed. Like you've thought this out how you're going to do it, and then you leave the knife sheath in the bed. So they all think they're a little bit smarter, and it goes back to what Bobby was saying. I agree with what Bobby was saying, and that is they're panicked. They're running around in circles. They can't play the long game, and they're thinking about the immediate issue. Nobody's calculating alimony and how to figure out how to pay their alimony and child support and co-parent when they're thinking about burying a body or dismembering their wife.
The next comment comes from 12 Happy Hannah, and this goes a little beyond, I think, all of our scope, but it's interesting, and it came up last night. We had, again, Wendy Murphy, who's a very well-known Boston-based attorney that specializes and knows a ton about domestic violence. 12 Happy Hannah writes, the sad reality of domestic violence in the legal system and no-drop policies is that prosecutors often cannot prove their case without the victim's testimony. That is why prosecutors often drop charges when the victim decides to no longer cooperate. Not their fault, obviously. It's the effect of the abuse cycle. I mean, this is a much bigger picture question, Bobby, but do we have to look at laws and how we treat victims of domestic violence now and make it easier for them to present their cases so they're not intimidated, let's say, by a prosecutor asking questions?
Well, I think we've come quite a ways in the last number of years, and we obviously still have a long way to go. I mean, that the aspect of requiring the victim to testify or to push the case, we all know, as your questioner indicates, in a lot of settings goes away. There's that added pressure, a whole number of factors, and it really doesn't get us a resolution, unfortunately. A lot of times we then move on to these type of things when we look back and see that there potentially were issues in the past that weren't dealt with in the proper way.
Next comment comes from JDR 9419. Monica, this one is for you. I don't know why they are stuck on the idea she was leaving him. Again, that came up yesterday. I feel like he likely has financial debt. She may have confronted him previously about his finances, and he did her in after the new year. I mean, I asked Bobby about thoughts pertaining to motive. I know it's very, very early on. You're the only woman on the panel. You think it was out of, her love or lust for another man, or something financially related? Any thoughts on that?
I haven't read or seen anything that talks about another man, so I have no idea if that's even a part of this. I think it could be something as simple as a control issue. I don't know if there's a history of domestic violence, but I do know that he really likes to control her with material things. And he thinks that's what's going to keep her and make her happy. And I'm just using the Maserati as an example because that's the main one. But if you look at some of the images that they've posted, look at what my sweetie gave me. And so if he felt like she was pulling away from the relationship, that could have been the trigger. But I think, and we all know whenever I say what I think, I'm usually wrong, is that it could have been something as simple as she's figuring it out, that her whole life she has 3 children, 3 beautiful, small, young children with this man, and everything that she built her life on is wrong. It's false. They're poor. They're broke. I don't even know what he does for a living. But
great question.
They were going to have a real hard time. They're going to have a real hard time sustaining that lifestyle. And I think she's, starting to figure it out, and that's scaring him. He's not going to be able to pull the wool over her eyes much more.
He doesn't have a lot of credibility, whether it's at home or in the court system or anywhere else at this point, unfortunately. He's really got nothing to hang his hat on, with respect to his life in and around and outside what's going on right now. So finances, quite frankly, as we talked about it tonight, could be a very large part of this.
The thumbnail title for this episode is Con Man, Killer, or Both, and it sure appears like he's headed for both titles at this point. Bobby, back to you for a second. New Year's Eve, they had a guest over that was there into the early morning hours. What are investigators, how are they proceeding with that guest? Obviously, they've had to have questioned that person. I don't even know if it's a male or a female at this point, but how are police handling that situation as we are talking?
Yeah, they're going to want to know at what point in the previous day did that person come over to the house? What went on that evening? What were the discussions? What were the issues? Were there any fights or arguments that went on? Were the kids having any issues? A myriad of things that person is going to be able to at least give us an idea of what the vibe was in the residence leading up to the morning of the alleged departure for the airport. So they're going to be tapping into that person and just trying to pick apart everything that they remember from that evening to, again, start that process of a timeline there and indicate what was the last moment that she was seen or heard from while in the residence. And then I would assume we're going to piece together from that point forward where she may have gone or where she may be at this point.
And a final comment, and we'll get closing thoughts. This one's for you, Monica. It comes from CVP 6707. How many Brian/Bryans with a Y can this country take? Anyone with a Brian/Brian with a Y in their life, check on those dudes, but don't do it. Don't go it alone. We've got Brian Laundrie. We have Brian Koberger. We now have Brian Walshe. Monica, is your husband's name Brian?
No.
Thank God. Thank God. Monica, whatever you do, never hang out with a Brian again. Only Joel's. His name is Robert Bobby McDonald, one of the best Boston names you could ever get, even though he's in New Haven, Connecticut. He was both a state of Connecticut and United States probation officer and spent over 20 years with the United States Secret Service protecting your president and your vice president. Thank you for your service, Bobby. Closing remarks.
Well, I think we need to sit back, see where this investigation takes us as those nuggets or pieces of the puzzle are put together. We may know what some of them are now. We may not know what others of them are. I think, obviously, his being incarcerated at this point on the probation violation gives police a little added extra time in putting the pieces of the case of the missing wife together. And again, like I said, there are a number of factors here that just don't pass the smell test. They'll have to be proven because he is innocent until proven guilty, the presumption of innocence. But I think a lot of things here are not passing that test and are going to be heading him down the path of a prosecution and a wrong direction and conviction.
Monica Jordan is the president of Jordan Research and Consulting, one of the nation's most sought-after private investigators, and now you know why, because you just heard her speak for an hour. She makes brilliant points. She has handled more than 50 death penalty trials. I don't think there's a death penalty in Connecticut. I mean, in Massachusetts. Bobby's in Connecticut. Monica, your final thoughts as you've reviewed this case now, moving forward. Does he get charged with murder? What happens next?
Oh, I think he'll ultimately get charged with murder, and I think his legal team is going to have a pretty big lift. And some of the issues that I'm seeing that are coming forward. I mean, I'm not saying they're not so insurmountable that they can't be overcome, but they're definitely going to earn their keep on this one. This is a tough case, and based on some of the things the client's done, he's not made it easy for them to try and look out for his best interest.
Thank you so much. A quick note, you can now not only join Patreon to support us, but also there is a YouTube membership. Feel free to sign up for that. Yours truly is working double time, and the wife is not paying me any extra, just forcing me to do this. So, but I love it. We'll be back very soon with another episode of Surviving the Survivor. Love you, America.